Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about crafting your persuasive speech, which in this case is the sustainability speech, which follows the problem, effect, solution pattern. So let's talk about all the steps involved in creating the perfect sustainability speech. Now, I'm going to tell you what to do to make it an A speech. But I do realize that based on everybody's time, resources, all of those stuff, based on what you have available to you, I don't want you to feel pressured to do everything. I'm telling you everything that will get you the A. But I know for some people, an A is not important. So forgive me if I seem to be emphasizing getting an A. I just want everybody to get an A. But if, do what works for you. But as you listen, decide on what you think is essential for you. And maybe for some things you say, that's just not me. I don't see myself doing that. And that's okay too. Okay? So go with what you're comfortable with. No judgment. Okay, so basically when you're doing your speech, you want to follow 4 steps. And this is for any speech, but especially for the sustainability speech, which involves a little bit more, you want to follow these steps. You're going to first plan, then write, then revise, then practice. But the planning is very important because when you don't plan, then chances are you're not going to have a great speech. And I think a good example of a speech that wasn't planned was the one that I did about the sustainability of friendship. I did not plan that speech. I just said, I know enough about it. I'm going to talk about it. And I was aware that I wouldn't have gotten an A speech, but I wanted to demonstrate what it's like when you don't plan. Because as soon as I started speaking, I realized that I hadn't quite worked out where the story should start. And because I enjoyed the story, I just started from the beginning, my beginning, and it ended up being way too long. So you really always want to plan before you start, because even a seasoned speaker like moi does not get it right when they don't plan. Doesn't matter who you are. You have to plan. Okay? So, plan. Now, when you plan, the first thing you want to do in the planning stage is do audience analysis. You want to think about who your audience is in terms of their age, their educational status, maybe some of their beliefs, some of their concerns, some of their pain. And in this case, it's maybe a little easier because your audience is your class. But in the real world, we always have to plan first, because as we create our speech, we have to have the audience in mind so that the points we raise will be applicable to that audience. So, audience analysis, step 1. Step 2, you have to ask yourself, what's my idea? What is it I really want to say? And sometimes that takes a little bit of time also. And after you think you have an idea, you want to run it through those 10 questions that I discussed in another video. Because you have to make sure that you're giving your audience a gift. So run it through the 10 questions. And remember, it's not about what you want to talk about, it's what your audience needs to hear. And your goal is to meet the needs of your audience members. So ask yourself the 10 questions and think about your audience and try to decide how that will impact their lives and how that will make their lives better. And as soon as you start to think about the audience and you think of those 10 questions, you want to think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because you have to try to figure out what need it is that you are meeting for your audience members. And when we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we know, most of us know that triangle, right? Try to figure out what need you are meeting so that your points can coincide with those needs. And this is just a quick Google search. I think this is Wikipedia. So you can find Maslow's triangle anywhere. Now, once you kind of think in terms of the needs, then you want to work out fully the idea. Now, in my case, the idea that I wanted to go with, which probably wasn't communicated very well, but what I was trying to say was that if we don't maintain or sustain our friendships, we may end up alone, lonely, and narcissistic. That's kind of where I was going. And sometimes you have an idea and it needs a little bit of refining. Once you start planning and writing, you may tweak it a little bit. So let's say I started out with this as my goal, to talk about sustaining friendships, because we may end up alone, lonely, and narcissistic. You never know. I might tweak it a little bit as I go along. Now, once you think you have the idea, you want to then create your thesis statement. Now, using my example still, my thesis statement was, today I'm going to talk to you about the sustainability of friendships, and I'll show you why not sustaining friendships is such a widespread problem. I'll show you the effects of not maintaining friendships, and I'll give you some tips of how we can do better at maintaining those relationships. So I have to have a thesis in mind as I begin planning. It may change a little bit, but I have to start somewhere. Now, once I have the thesis in mind, it's time to brainstorm for content. And you don't want to limit yourself yet, because sometimes our better ideas are not the primary or first ideas. So brainstorm to find as many ideas as you can. Now, as I talk about this sustainability speech, I'm going to be referring a lot to Nancy Duarte's book, HBR Guide to Persuasive Presentations. Excellent book. So if you're in my public speaking class, our textbook is primary, but I'm just giving you additional content because this is amazing. Seriously. So most of the diagrams that I will show you are from this textbook. And I just wanted to show you the mind map in chapter 2, I think it is. This is an example. When I said brainstorm for as much content as you can, this is what we're talking about. Coming up with everything. Before you narrow yourself in and box yourself in, just come up with as many ideas as you can. And this is an example of what it could look like. Now, once you've brainstormed and you've come up with all those great ideas, you're going to start now to narrow it down, and you're going to start to filter the ideas so that you can decide on the best ideas that will suit your audience. So let's say you know that everyone in your audience is between 18 and say 35. Then you want to ensure that your examples are less about maybe what would be suitable for a 55-year-old person, only because you want to meet the needs of the actual audience members. So still referring to this book, this is an example of what it looks like when you go from a ton of ideas to the narrowed down ideas. And you notice right here, she says the first most obvious idea. That's here. And a lot of times the obvious ideas come to us first, but most times the obvious ideas are not novel. And they're obvious because we've heard it before and we've seen examples. But you want to brainstorm as much as you can, because the more you brainstorm is the more ideas you'll come up with and the more creative your ideas will be. And you cannot do this the night before the speech is due. You always have to plan a little bit ahead. I usually say you need at least a week. So if you know you're going to be giving a speech following Tuesday or Wednesday, yeah, you gotta start early. 1 week, minimum 1 week. Okay. Now, once you've come up with the best ideas, maybe you've decided on what you think could work for the problem, what could work for the effect, and what could work for the solution. Once you've come up with that, the next thing you need to do is decide on the organizational pattern. Many people just fall into the habit of examples and topical pattern, and they can work. But for a persuasive speech, that's not going to be the best choice, and that will not give you maximum impact. You know, the textbook and most public speaking books will tell you about the chronological pattern, the spatial pattern, the cause and effect pattern, the narrative pattern, compare and contrast pattern, and those two really are the best. So when you think of the content that you need to support your points, think in terms of comparing and contrasting. So that's a compare contrast pattern of organization, as well as the narrative pattern, which most people know about, especially if you're in my public speaking class. When it comes to the persuasive speech, the sustainability speech, the best patterns are the compare and contrast, the narratives, and using examples with shocking statistics, shocking or novel. That will give you maximum impact. Sometimes people use definitions, and definitions can work, but if you're ever going to be doing a definition pattern of development, you want to combine it with something else. So you can mix, you can match, you can combine, but keep the compare and contrast, narratives, and shocking statistics as your go-to. Number one. Now, for those of you who are wondering about comparing and contrasting, I want you to look at this table here from the same book, where past and present is juxtaposed with the future. So past, future, need, fulfillment, speed, endurance, ambition, humility, stagnation, growth. Those are contrasts. And you are trying to show in the persuasive speech that this is a problem. This is the effect. You're trying to persuade people to see things differently. Therefore, you need to contrast a lot of what you're talking about. You need to compare and contrast so that people can see the gap. So remember, compare and contrast, use that primarily. And then you need to choose your most powerful warrant. Figure out for yourself, is this a fact? Is this a value? Or is this a policy? And when you know what it is, it helps you to decide on what you want to use for your support. Okay? So always determine if it's a warrant of fact, value, or policy. And then once you've done all of that, you are now ready to actually create your outline. And I want to emphasize that the outline must follow the alphanumeric structure, especially for your sake, because when you see it visually, it helps you to come up with main points, supporting points, and maybe support of the supporting point. Okay? So for those of you in my public speaking class, you will find this in Blackboard. And even if you are not in my public speaking class, I have the website address for where I got it. It's on the internet. It's anywhere. Okay? But I want you to focus on the body, where you see there is a main point, which has to be a full sentence, the actual topic sentence. And then you want to have the supporting point. And maybe you can have two, but it depends on your time. Okay? So when you have this structure in mind, you fill in the blanks, and then you time yourself. And then you think, okay, this has taken too much time, so let me see which one I can lose. Because when you start, you're never going to just have all the right points or be within your time limit. So write with a little bit of care as you consider the time. And then when you're done, you may have to delete some, but you must follow this structure. And it's alphanumeric because alpha as in the letters and the numbers. So the way you do the indentation will help you also when you are rehearsing, because the visual impact will help you to decide on what's a main point and what's a sub point. And it will help me when I am marking and listening to you. And you do lose marks if the outline isn't correct. So you want to do a correct outline. Okay. Sorry, but that's how we give marks. Okay. Okay. Now we're on to the good stuff, the actual outline for the speech.